Well, it's not really surprise to, well, anyone that for the longest time, the right has had an incredibly large issue dealing with the culture where most of the time we're spending our time either completely ignoring culture entirely or trying to pick up scraps where we can find them, like trying just to reclaim a few characters, while the left has gone full steam ahead, full steam locomotive, and has left us in the dust when it comes to culture, and only recently have we started to catch up to this situation. And even still, despite the fact that we've had a long history of the right completely ignoring culture and the necessity of preserving it through media, this doesn't prevent people from still running their mouths now that we started to catch up, with people like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro and other controlled opposition saying things like shaming people for watching anime or saying that all comics are inherently hedonistic, bad, and not worth your time because they're for children. Or saying that people who play video games will never know the touch of a woman because they're wasting their time playing this communist gobbledygook. And yes, I'm strawmanning for the point of exaggeration. Good catch. But there's been a new voice who's come in and entered this little discussion and threw his hat into the ring a little bit. And while he might have done this in the past, I'm not entirely sure, it is the fantastic creator known as Homath, who does a wonderful job of summarizing some real mental phenomena, mostly presented by infantilized women. But this time he's turned his head over to more culture-related things, really focusing down on this gaming, animation, and a few other things centered around a really weird fetish display. As some absolute psycho in a dog mask was at an event where some transvestites decided to have furries roll over and do dog tricks as a human-dog competition. Which does go to counter the whole anime thing a little bit, because when real humans turn a person into a dog, everyone's okay with it. But when a single anime man turns a girl into a dog, everyone loses their mind. And I'm going to be completely frank with you all. I'm a young 20-something college student, so my ability to engage with all of the topics at hand are not fully developed. Half of this video is me going to be offering counters, offering context, and offering questions, because there are things I just don't know because my scope of understanding is limited. So I'm heavily encouraging and requesting people to go to comments, tell me I'm a fucking moron, and correct me on what I'm missing out on. Especially because, unfortunately, most of my education is done in this neo-Marxist framework known as the American college system. And worst of all, I'm getting a degree in psychology, so that doubly affects me for that. Now, before we go any further, like, subscribe, and let's get into this. So as I mentioned, this kicks off with this wonderful display of why we need a new kind of hunting season, but that's beyond the point. Lots of disgusting display of pure fetishization, which, you know what, if you want to do this in the safety of your room, okay, just don't make me have to see it, and don't go out celebrating it outside of your gross little clubs that I have no business being in. Now this is reposted with the comment, "Can someone explain what this is?" To which Homath does what he does and says, "Yes, I can. This is going to clear a lot up. Go pee or get a glass of water first." Root beer. You're going to need a minute to process. Welcome back. Have you noticed how the leftists gravitate to certain things? How sort of the same way that conservatives go hunting and fishing and watch sports, leftoid goblin perverts like these cluster around things like anime, video games, sexual deviancy, and anthropomorphism. I just want to point out the good boy Ragazes, who does literally every single one of these things, and he's very much not a leftoid. But also, I'm going to firsthand disagree with this assessment that hunting, fishing, and watching sports is the same rationale between anime, video games, sexual deviancy, and anthropomorphism, especially the first two. You see, the first two are utter escapism. Their whole point is to distract you from the real world, and in a sense, hunting, fishing, and watching sports does the same thing, but they do it in a completely different way. The goal of sports, hunting, and fishing is either peace of mind or competition. The goals of these are all kind of different. They're not really the same level of goal. As well, they're all different kinds of escapism. Admittedly, hunting most of the time is escapism, but at the same time, it serves more than that. It affirms a primal desire, and it creates a sense of self-reliance. Fishing is a practice in patience. It's something that develops your need to sit. It's something that develops your ability to sit still, stay calm, and even a kind of meditation, if you will. And then watching sports is a way to get competition and violence nature out through projection onto the screen. There are values in these, but it's not the same as anime or video games. Now, yes, video games is all about competition, depending on the game, of course. If you're playing multiplayer games, it's probably for competition. And both of these do affirm the more escapist nature similar to the previous ones, but the way you go about engaging in escapism through this manner is a bit more passive. As for sexual deviancy, don't pretend that's something that only belongs to the left. It's only more prevalent in the left because it's more accepted there. And anthropomorphism, depending on how you refer to it, I know you're probably referring to it in the manner of furries, which, yeah, sure, the left seems to have a lot more furries, but I also know a concerningly large number of furries who are unironic Nazis. But anthropomorphizing other things is something that all humans do. It is not something that only leftoid goblins do. Every single person does it. Tell me, do you thank ChatGPT when you're done with this conversation? Do you apologize when you bump into a shoe rack? That is a form of anthropomorphizing your environment. Now, Homath continues, well, conservatives do those things because that's what everyone else did. Daddy hunted, Grandpappy was a Calvinist, but no one has done any of this dog mask shit before. And once again, I'm going to have to completely disagree with this notion that Homath is doing. First of all, are you really saying that nobody in the past dressed up as an animal and got freaky with it? I'm going to have to disagree with you there, bud. But at the same time, conservatives don't adopt their hobbies just because that's what everyone else does. Sure, I have some hobbies that I got from my parents. For instance, my dad was really big into the SCA, and as a side effect of that, I engage in a lot of medieval recreational sword fighting. My dad was a Magic the Gathering player, so I play Magic the Gathering. But it's not because my dad did it, it's only because that's what I knew how to do. I was taught how to do that, so I developed an edge early on. I guarantee you that if I didn't play Magic as a child, I still would have eventually got into it as an adult. It's not so much that I do it because my dad does it. The only impact my dad had on me for that is he's the one who taught me how to do it. He didn't teach me how to play video games. I do that all on my own, and I play a fuck ton of them. And so do most of the conservatives I know. Most of the conservatives I know, by the way, their parents don't even know what a fucking controller is. They're like black people with computers. So I think this assessment is entirely false. There's nothing, I don't think there's a single bit of basis in this whatsoever. It implies that conservatives are completely incapable of breaking the mold, and implies that liberals only do things with the express goal of breaking said mold. He then continues, now if you ask them, they might tell you that they chose these things because they are progressive. We are creative souls expressing who we truly are, or whatever. Once again, implying that liberals only do what they do to break the mold. And while I do think there might be something a little bit there, as in liberals will do things because it's too progressive, because they want to push the line, I'll agree with you there. I'm not going to come here and say that they do things explicitly only because of that notion. And more importantly, I don't think it has something per se to do with progressivism, but instead posthumanism. And while there's some link there, I don't think it's the same thing. Look at body modification, which, while some conservatives partake in body modification, it is a lot more popular amongst anarchists or extreme liberals. And why is that? Well, from my personal experience, it's purely because they want to traverse that line of humanity to become whatever's next, become the thing that they feel they are, whether it's an animal or a fucking alien or whatever. And while I would say there probably are some ties to that from liberalism, I'm not going to sit here and blame liberalism for the reason behind it. Now, Homath does offer his own little bit of a rebuttal, but if that was true, wouldn't they all have their own individualistic expression of self? Why would pup play become popular with, what is it, like 10% of them now? Now, Homath, there's no need to be conservative on that estimation. But I'm going to offer this counterexample. I don't really think stuff like pup play is per se something that's liberal. And I will agree, too many of them do it when their goal is self-expression. They all want to do what's in the clique. But here's the other thing you're completely ignoring. Furrydom is a form of social contagion. There's a common adage online. The number one way to become a furry is to make fun of them. And of course, that can and has been extrapolated out to most other forms of fetishization. Homath then goes in to really give his explanation as to why this takes place. Leftists actively hate their own free will. All of this weird shit they do, those are attempts to rid themselves of responsibility. They don't want to be held accountable for anything, like what we complain about in typical immature women. I'm a dog equals I'm just a dumb animal. Care for me. This is why children's cartoons are always animals, animal nature, or equal child in nature, equal innocent, equal no free will. Well, I will have to agree with a little bit that said there, it's not all of it, and I think he's extrapolating a little too far here. Liberals 100% want no accountability, and that's something we talk about a lot on my friend's podcast, Touch Grass with Theo Snodgrass, every Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the correct time zone. Not all of this, though, is a side effect of having no accountability. Now, I will also agree that they don't want free will, because I don't think these people are capable of free will. I personally don't think most people are. Hence why, when it comes to most liberals, it's all about the most recent download. Now, I'm not going to say that's explicitly a liberal thing, because because a good number of conservatives do or used to do it too. It isn't that they're liberal, it's that they're NPCs and they're just receiving the most prevalent download. If the most prevalent download was a conservative one, most of these liberals would become conservative, only because that's what their hive mind overlords tell them to think. Now, one thing I'm kind of shocked that he didn't mention here, given its prevalence with furrydom and liberal fetish culture, is stuff like age play and trans ageism, which is something that unfortunately exists, where people create a little age that they identify significantly more than they do with their actual age. Why? As a way to forego responsibilities, accountability, and a need to do things. They basically project themselves into the mind space of a toddler so that they don't have to deal with the responsibilities of an adult because they were never prepared to deal with it. They were never taught how to handle free will, and now that it was thrust upon them, they try to give it up at every point. So I will agree that leftists don't want free will, they want to get rid of it because free will requires thinking and requires logic. And that's something they're just not capable of. Now here's where things get a little interesting. He then continues, I'm actually a woman equals I'm valuable because I exist, not because of what I do. Games equal I still have to play and learn, I'm not a grown-up yet. Communism equals guarantee me an income even if I do nothing. Even most homosexuality equals I'm in the girl's role now. This happens to me, not because I earned it, but because I'm here. Hold up, first of all, Homoth, how dare you assume that most bottoms are pillow princesses? Come on, show them some respect. But I think he is spot on the communist thing. You see, these people, they have no accountability, so they assume that no one else does either, and more importantly, they assume that they must be held accountable for. And thus they demand communistic basic level income and a demand for privilege for doing nothing to earn it, because they think that they deserve it purely based on existence, because that's what they deem society to be worthy of and demand. But these are the same people who don't know that you need a farm to fill up your grocery store. You ask them to shut down the farms, people like this will legitimately say, yes, let's shut down the farms because I buy my meat from the grocery store. Now this one though, the game one, is one that is really a bad take. It's a wrong take. Games equals I still have to play and learn, I'm not a grown-up yet. No, you have to play and learn because it is a necessary part of human brain and function. Even adults engage in play. Spoiler alert, most sex activities is a form of play. Playing isn't something that is inherently infantilizing. It is not something that is inherently focused at being a child. It is something that adults do, it is something that teenagers do, and of course it's something that kids do. Everyone engages in play. It is a necessary part of human function. Why do you think when it comes to raising children, dads play with their children significantly more than women do? Well, it's because play is necessary both for the well-being of a father and for the development of children. Humans, as adults, will engage in play because it is a necessary form of child rearing. There are other points to counter this play focus, but I'm going to get to those significantly later. Now, Homoth is going to extrapolate this out to anime. What does this have to do with anime? Well, there's a reason I use cartoons in my videos. It's because they're simple. Like games, like A to B to C, 1, 2, 3, cartoons are a way of depicting only the parts of something that you want people to look at. And this isn't really a cartoon point, this is just integral to any form of directed art. Even most cinematography demands your attention to certain areas, and really good animators will demand your attention to things that are completely irrelevant as a show of the quality of animation, such as a Studio Ghibli movie where that's really the focus, is showing you the small details in the background instead of demanding too much focus on the foreground. He then follows, look at these faces I drew. Image. The male one is just 3 circles, 2 dots, and a wavy line. There's very little room for interpretation. He's puzzled. She's disappointed. All of the remaining complexity of humanity is stripped away. Pictures for reference. He then states that drawing cartoons equals I did all the work of interpretation for you. That's why people come to me. I teach things quickly by showing you only what you need to see. Cartoons, anime in particular, are similarly stripped down, and anime in particular acts as a gateway drug because it is so widely used as a style, you can jump from artist to artist without feeling like you've changed channels. And there's infinite content, so you spiral downward into self-imposed infancy, which is satanic. You start with Akira or Cowboy Bebop, you end up developing feelings for anime girls who are easily idealized because they are only the bits of girls that you like with none of that pesky human nature. You desire simpler, less human, your chosen content gets more and more childish. Disney, My Little Pony, whatever the internet has to offer, anything you can think of. Okay, Hometh, I love your content, but there's a lot to unpack here, and most of it I'm going to have to disagree with. Now, yes, the point of cartoons is to demand attention at certain things to make it easier to digest. But here's the issue, and here's the reason. When it comes to animation, let's use Robin Hood, for example. Disney's Robin Hood versus Robin Hood Prince of Thieves. Disney's Robin Hood is much more digestible for a wider audience. Why? It's shorter, it has music, which makes it very good for children especially, but in such a way that is enjoyable for all ages. And while it dumbs down certain ideas, it does it in a way that does not infantilize you, it does not talk down to the audience, but instead meets the audience where they are. Now, the audience is intended for little kids, but that doesn't mean they aren't drawing values for adults. In fact, this entire idea that going into Disney movies is infantilizing yourself is inherently false, because most of the time the Disney idea was we were going to make movies for adults that children will enjoy. Disney movies are not kids movies, they are normal adult movies that are designed to be accessible to little kids. There is an integral difference between the two. Go and watch Hunchback of Notre Dame and tell me that the song Hellfire is directed towards little kids. Are you really going to say that a song about a priest lusting over a gypsy woman is somehow intended for child audiences? You are completely ignoring the message and going straight for the superficial aspects of it, such as the animated medium. And that goes double for things like Akira and Cowboy Bebop. My journey for anime didn't start with Cowboy Bebop. It was actually started by Fate Zero, which, yes, Fate Zero is a much more adult anime. I will admit that. And from there, I did watch things like Naruto, and I did watch some of the more childish anime. Not because I had a gateway drug to the medium, but because I was told they were good stories. I don't watch a lot of anime. I don't watch a lot of television either, for that matter. But I rarely will look at the target demographic as a gateway to prevent me from watching it, unless that target demographic actually does impede on the quality of the show. Take a look at Naruto, which is made significantly worse by their insistence on focusing on a child demographic. If you were to make something like that for adult audiences, it would be far better because you could tackle the themes in much more adept ways. And then this comment of everything looks kind of homogenous so you can watch different things without feeling like you've changed channels, that's also just an entirely incorrect statement. Hello, my fellow kids would make. Full Metal Alchemist to Hellsing Ultimate to Cowboy Bebop are completely different, and you really do feel the difference. There's different styles in animation, different focuses, different language levels, different messages, the things are so heavily different that it is significantly more different than going from watching, say, a rom-com to a drama. Actually, hold up, it's not far different, it is the exact same thing, because anime is not a genre, it is a style. It is no different than a live-action movie. Aside from the fact that everything is based on drawings, which, yes, that does dumb down some of the understanding, some of the requirement for mental thought, but that's not being done to insult, talk down, or degrade the audience. The focus there is to make it more consumable, yes, but also to allow for a more artistic expression in its creation. The comparison you're making here is not to say that they're worse films. An actual better comparison is saying that anime to regular stuff, when you gotta be specific, good anime to regular TV, Cowboy Bebop to Naruto, is no different than Alfred Hitchcock to David Ayer. That's a far better comparison. We're not looking at two completely different mediums, we're looking at the same medium made with different levels of quality and effectiveness. I mean, if you go and watch Rear Window and then compare that to Moonlight, they're both dramas, they're both about life, but one talks down to the audience and the other one treats the audience with respect. It has nothing to do with the animated medium, but how that medium is used. And then just kindly fuck off with this slippery slopeism. No, watching Cowboy Bebop does not lead you to liking anime girls. That happens when you watch Cowboy Bebop because you get to look at Faye Valentine. In fact, if you want a good way to not appreciate anime girls, you go and watch the more childish shows like Fire Force, where their entire insistence on running that Lucky Lecture joke ruins a large amount of the show. He then continues, and this might be one of the most retarded takes, you get sucked into the feeling of experiencing only the good parts of life and none of the downsides, and before long, it comes into your politics. I should be baby, feed me, wah, is all the left says anymore. Now, okay, yes, the left, most of them really do adopt that I should be baby, feed me, wah. That's their mentality. I will agree there. But the problem here is it has nothing whatsoever to do with cartoons, to do with anime, or anything like that. You are making a false leap. I could say the same thing about pointing to 500 million rom-coms where only the good happens. Are you saying that rom-coms will infantilize you and lead you to I'm baby mentality? This take sounds almost intentionally obtuse when it comes to the discussion of anime and games. Now, I will say, I was over at an event a couple weeks ago, and while we were there, it was a rock show, and there was a girl who was the same age as me working the booth. She looked terrible. I thought she was 30. But she had green hair, she had a cringe communist shirt on, and I heard her go, "I'm just a baby," after saying her age, and I nearly blew my brains out in Minecraft. And you could just tell by the way she looked that she watches stupid shit like Demon Slayer. But here's the thing, I think we're looking at a bit of a post hoc argument, in my personal opinion. Homath is saying that people become leftist baby brains by watching anime. And I would argue that the people who are leftist baby brains watch anime because they're baby brains. Because they think it's not deep, and therefore they won't engage with the depth there. I mean, look at the reaction to the anime Freyron. Is that how you say it? I've never watched it. The one with the far-right elf lady that everybody likes. Well, everybody liked until they realized she was a conservative analogy. The left didn't give two shakes of a rat's ass about the philosophy there. The left likes shows like Fullmetal Alchemist, which are explicitly anti-leftist, anti-communist, inherent to the message of the show. But they don't care. Because they aren't looking for the depth, they're just looking for something that's flashy, fun, and easy to understand. Like you're saying, they miss the depth. But that has nothing to do with the fact that it's anime per se. They are just looking at the shapes and colors. It's no different to them than watching the Wiggles. But while that may be the case for them, that's not what's going on. Anime is not akin to the Wiggles. He then continues, and since we are long past the point where anyone who falls into this soul blender can easily find others to support their delusions with a few clicks, we now have them acting it out in public under the guise of art or identity. Look at absolutely any weird thing the left does, and what you'll find is I'm baby I deserve. No one wants to grow up, and you can't blame them. It doesn't pay anymore. Finally, if that wasn't enough for you one day, go read about who Aleister Crowley and what the Aeon of Horus is. Now, I think we're delving into two different issues here. The leftoids who are obsessed with anime are not per se the ones who think they deserve to be paid for art. Is there overlap? Absolutely. But once again, post hoc. These leftoids would still think they deserve to be paid for any kind of art, deserve to have any identity, and have any kind of art, irrelevant of the existence of anime. Irrelevant of the existence of My Little Pony, irrelevant of the existence of all of this. It has nothing to do with the medium. They watch the medium, yes, because they have those identities, but they do not have those identities because they watch the medium. A good example of the actual analogy for this argument is it's basically him saying that I am a conservative because I watch Nerdrotic. Wrong, I watch Nerdrotic because I have conservative values about media. It is a post hoc reverse ideology. I do not watch these people because I need the download of what my mentality is. I already have my mentality. I'm watching them because they will help me explore and expand it. By his logic, me watching the aristocratic utensil is going to turn me into a monarchist anti-suffragist. And while I agree with some points he has to make, I love his avenue of articulation, I'm not going to sign off on all of these ideologies because I don't agree with all of them. And I can watch people I don't agree with if I appreciate the way they go about creating their art. Now, there are some really important counters. I'm going to go through some of the simpler ones, and then we're going to move on to something a little bit different. First of all, from the Dragon's Treasure, right-wingers once again for the millionth time exposing themselves as knuckle-dragging Philistines. The anime comparison is so over the top that I'm actually at a loss for words. Unless he's making some kind of April Fool's joke, but I know he's not. They speak out so much against communism, but their world would be so lifeless and devoid of color that even the greatest of communist blocks would feel inspiring compared to anything they can produce. Eat, sleep, work, reproduce. Anything that's not directly that or done in the wrong way is satanic. And yeah, there's that kind of is what he's saying. Conservatives are losing the culture war because we refuse to create, and we refuse to create because it has been painted as a childish thing and a communistic and satanic thing to create something. We have effectively become the Jehovah's Witnesses of politics. And of course, like I said, he is expanding these to be a bit more small-minded than they should be. As where he said, welcome back, have you noticed yet how leftists gravitate to certain things, how sort of the same way that conservatives go hunting, fishing, and watching sports, leftward goblin perverts like these cluster around things like anime, video game sexuality, deviancy, and anthropomorphism, to which Scorch Voluntar, right off the bat, they failed. I was a conservative up until 2016, I even voted for Trump. Even back then, I loved anime, video games, porn, and was a full-blown furry. All of these apply to both left and right, none of these things are exclusive to one side or another. And he's 100% right, though he does hurt his argument a bit by admitting that he's no longer a conservative, or at least I assume that's what he's saying. But like I've said, most of the furries I know, well about 50-50 split actually, are conservative, and they're far more conservative than any of the non-furries I know. Like if you were to put it into a quiz, far-right furry versus movie Bob, they'd be inseparable. Revenant here also had a pretty good take on it, some truth in the idea that escapism can become self-sabotage, but this blanket scapegoating of anime and gaming in particular is malformed. Young men have always partaken in escapism throughout history. Anime is storytelling, video games are role-playing, men have always done these things for as long as we've put pen to paper. We just have fancier technology now. Frankly, the best way to further alienate young men is to attack the only things they're still allowed to enjoy in a society that constantly kneecaps scapegoats and stifles them. 100% correct here as well. The problem isn't the medium, it is the level of consumption. And leftists engage in a very toxic, unhealthy level of consumption and a level of obsession over the things they consume. Now, I thought this notion of the Aeon of Horus was interesting, so I looked it up on Wikipedia, the god of all sources, obviously. And it really is just a dogmatic, self-focused ideology, something that is all about self-realization and true will and the individualism and spirit awakening. Which the Aeon of Horus is amplified by the notion of the child god symbolism, which is all about innocence, new beginnings, and the potential for growth, aka the infantilization of society, human nature, and, well, leftoids. This is a piece of literature really focused on this leftist Gnosticism that surrounds these leftoid goblins. This idea of pure expression, pure will, even though it's not their actual will, and pure discovery without limitation. The kind of thing that allows for toxic obsession and engagement and consumption. Now here's an element where I get to sound pretentious even though I don't have a fucking clue what I'm talking about. This was an idea brought to me by my dad where he mentioned a song that people who are old might know, being a song from Rush whose title is Cygnus X-1 Book 2 Hemispheres, even though I don't know if there's a Book 1, drawn from the band Rush, of course, which is famous for their extremely long and convoluted rock operas. This song, by the way, is 15 minutes long. Oh, sorry, according to this version, 18.5. And it has some lines in it that are really tied to what I've been talking about with the issues with Homath's comment. As some lines of the song will indicate, as you see, when our weary world was young, the struggle of the ancient first began. The god of love and reason sought alone to rule the fate of man. They battled through the ages, but still neither force would yield. The people were divided, and every soul a battlefield. And it first starts with the Song of Apollo, Bring Your Wisdom. I bring truth and understanding, I bring wit and wisdom fair, precious gifts beyond compare, we can build a world of wonder, I can make you all aware. Basically, enlightenment. Apollo is the vision of enlightenment in this analogy. And the people were delighted, coming forth to claim their prize. They ran to build their cities and converse among the wise. But one day the streets fell silent, yet they knew not what was wrong. The urge to build these fine things seemed not to be so strong. The wise men were consulted, and the bridge of death was crossed in quest of Dionysus to find out what they had lost. Effectively, this is where we are in society with where the leftists are. Leftists are at the end of Apollo. Apollo has abandoned them. They have lost all sign of reason, and they don't really know why. The real reason why is because they've abandoned reason for the sake of hedonism. They have searched exclusively for consumption. All they desire is to consume, and that is where the Dionysus part really comes into play as to what's really happening with the leftists as laid out by Homath. I bring love to give you solace in the darkness of the night, in the hearts of eternal light. You need only trust your feelings, only love can steer you right. I bring laughter, I bring music, I bring joy, and I bring tears. I will soothe your primal fears, throw off those chains of reason, and your prison disappears. The cities were abandoned, and the forest echoed song. They danced and lived as brothers, they knew love could not be wrong. Food and wine they had aplenty, and they slept beneath the stars. The people were contented, and the gods watched from afar. But the winter fell upon them, and it caught them unprepared, bringing wolves in cold starvation as the hearts of men despaired. The left has abandoned reason, has abandoned logic, and has abandoned anything that can give them safety for when the proverbial winter comes. They engage in pure hedonistic desire, pure fun, pure infantilization, which is kind of what's being discussed here. They have fully given their hearts and souls to Dionysus. And where the real problem lies is who Homath is blaming. In this situation, Homath is claiming that the reason why the people abandoned logic and reason was because the hedonism existed. They had access to the hedonistic material, so they abandoned their logic and reason for the comfort of hedonism. When in reality, the left was always going to go to Dionysus. They were always going to abandon Apollo. They didn't abandon Apollo because anime exists. They abandoned Apollo because they don't want to work for things. Homath has inverted the reason. Now, there's another excellent response, and one that I do want to do absolute justice, and that is coming from this post by Devin Erickson. This argument is a speedrun of how the right lost the culture war for 3 decades and almost destroyed Western civilization by doing so. The right became infected with 2 terrible assumptions, that childishness is bad and that play is for children. Both of these assumptions are based on a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature, how humans work, and why humans are the dominant species on Earth. The difference between a human and a great ape is a special kind of genetic adaptation called neoteny. It means the retention of juvenile traits into adulthood. To a large degree, humans become humans by retaining the traits of baby apes and adult apes. Not just the facial physiology, but the curiosity, neuroplasticity, and yes, the tendency to play. To understand why this helped humans, you have to understand what play is, beyond the knee-jerk, common-sense reaction of frivolous things children do to entertain themselves. But that's not an explanation of what play is, because why does play entertain children? Why are they evolved to like it? Because play, games, and stories are training for adult responsibilities. Kittens pounce on string, chase each other, and wrestle because pouncing, chasing, and wrestling are the responsibilities of an adult cat. If 2 little boys find 2 sticks, they will sword fight with them. Hell, if give a little boy a fucking Pop-Tart, he will bite it into the shape of a pistol and run around yelling bang. But what about adults? Most adult animals don't play much compared to when they were kids, and don't learn much either because there isn't a whole lot left to learn that they actually capable of learning. At least not compared to the volume and rate of learning that they experienced as children. But humans, the galaxy brain geniuses of the animal kingdom, have the capacity to learn at a high rate throughout life. And neoteneously, retaining childhood traits equips us with the urges to match that capability. Human beings not only can do play throughout life, they must, or their learning abilities stagnate and atrophy, and their emotional health suffers. If you teach an adult to play, fun games and stories are childish things that he should put away when he becomes a man, after a decade or so you have a dullard, fit only for manual labor or routine and repeated application of rote processes. Is Homath such a person? Of course not. He has risen to internet fame by playing, by drawing anime, well, not really anime, and telling stories. His actions demonstrate an innate understanding of what cartoons and stories and simple things that explain by removing complexity are not frivolous activities at all, they are vital. By his contempt for the leftists, their arrested development, and the way they hide from responsibility has caused him to fall into the same error that came within a hair's breadth of destroying Western civilization. The right abandoned culture. Conservatives stopped making stories and games that expressed their worldview because they decided games were for nerds, and stories were for man-children who were too lazy to spend their evenings reading car repair manuals and the Wall Street Journal. By deciding that play was for queers and commies, the right ceded the creation of art, of stories, of games entirely to, well, commies and queers. Of course, you lose the culture war if you don't show up and fight it, genius. Fiction and games are the DNA of civilization, and thus they are the battleground on which the culture war is fought. If you don't make games, toys, and stories that express your worldview, people, both children and adults, are going to play with toys created to express other worldviews, and play is learning. So what do you think they are going to learn? You cannot hunt, fish, and baseball your way to cultural relevance because anyone with a brain that isn't half dead from underuse is going to read fiction, play games, or watch cartoons, and maybe all these things. Why do you think the entire tech industry became left-coded? Leftism has nothing to do with tech, but video games, Legos, and science fiction do. Engineers couldn't give less of a shit about baseball. Active, curious, playful minds design the future, whether you like that or not. The Wright brothers played with bicycles and kites, and now you can fly to Paris overnight. Elon Musk read the moon is a harsh mistress with a flashlight under the covers, and now we can catch returning rocket boosters with giant mecha chopsticks. Unless your cultural faction participates in what these people are interested in, you will not recruit them, and they will design a future that doesn't include you. Frankly, sometimes I think the conservatives are still taking their cultural marching orders from a pack of humorless, soulless dullards who would still be losing as hard as ever if the theater kids hadn't pissed off Elon Musk. I know I read through that thing entirely in one go. Well, not really one go. Don't mind the cuts. But it's because he's 100% right. I agree with every single thing that was said there. He is correct that if it wasn't for theater kids pissing off Elon Musk, we wouldn't have him and we likely wouldn't be in the winner's seat at this moment. He is right that there has been no cultural conservative media for the last 20 years, not because there isn't demand, but because there isn't an insistence on production. Yes, I will concede that right now you couldn't release a pro-conservative movie in any of the mainstream areas or avenues, but guess what? It wasn't like that 20 years ago, it wasn't like that 15 years ago, and it wasn't like that 10 years ago. The problem wasn't the marketplace, it was the lack of people willing to create it, because we have insisted that creation is limited only to those who engage in childish behaviors, and if you are a child, if you engage in childish behaviors, then you cannot be a man. That is the real problem. How do we miss the lessons that were taught to us by the most important conservative writers of the past? How do we ignore the lessons taught to us by Walt Disney, by Tolkien, by C.S. Lewis? C.S. Lewis has one of the most important quotes, and we've completely abandoned it out of fear of looking like a queerdo commie. As he put it, when I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up. The being grown up is the desire of a child, and that is something you should completely disavow as you reach adulthood. If you do not play, you do not grow. If you do not create, you do not teach. Most teachers are liberal. Most artists are liberal. Every single published book is a liberal. Every single psychologist, every single sociologist, the vast majority of scientists are liberal. Not because these fields demanded it, not because the conservatives were chased out in droves. That happened afterwards. The reason is because we told conservatives that they can't engage in this kind of behavior because it is too childish. Guess what experiments are? Experimentation is a form of play. When you form a hypothesis, you are playing make-believe. And so if you tell these people that they're not allowed to play, they will not engage in science. And if they don't engage in science, we lose complete control over the trajectory of real life. And that is exactly what has happened. There are a lot of lessons to be learned from hunting, fishing, and baseball. And while that is a form of play, 100%, that is not the only form of play. And there are lessons you cannot learn from those aspects. Tell me, where are you going to learn the idea of mercy? Where are you going to learn the idea of controlled violence? Baseball isn't a sport that allows you to be violent. If you at least want to pretend there, you do that with hockey. A huge portion of learning is theoretical exploration, and you cannot engage a lot of these ideas through practical exploration. That's the importance of the theoretical. Now, I want to point out some of the things that Homath mentioned as well. Homath specifically names the show My Little Pony. And I'm going to say some things, so please don't crucify me for saying it. When I was younger, I watched a lot of My Little Pony with my sister and my parents. My parents, both my mom and my dad, love My Little Pony. Why? Because My Little Pony is actually quite pro-conservative. Well, maybe not pro-conservative, but it's definitely... Well, the entire point of My Little Pony is that it is inherently anti-communist, with the exception of the most recent computer-generated movie that they released on Netflix. The actual show, My Little Pony Friendship's Magic, is one that is entirely antithetical to the notions of communism or socialism. So how is it that these leftoid goblins are watching these kind of shows and not just absorbing all of it directly into their downloaded port? And this is exactly why I said Homath's points are all post hoc arguments. None of them are accurate. None of them are a true picture of what he's trying to paint. The leftoids engage with this media because they do not have the capacity to understand the themes and understand anything slightly more complex. The conservative can engage with this media only if they deem it appropriate to do so, but they will understand the deeper messages. We have alienated the ability for growth, the ability for development, the ability for learning, and the ability to take back culture because we have deemed it satanic and queer. So how do we expect to get these people who still want to be able to play, who have not downloaded the same exact set of social schemas that we have enforced upon ourselves, if we are going to tell them that their entire worldview is wrong? You can't take someone who's a disenfranchised degenerate leftists and tell them that they can't play anymore. What we're looking at here is we're telling the liberals who might not want to be liberal anymore that you have to completely abandon everything integral to your worldview. And that's not how you integrate somebody into your movement. That is how you keep them out of it. Here's something that I talk about a lot when it comes to conservatives, especially people like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro, and unfortunately, I might have to add Homath to that list if he keeps saying stupid shit. The number one problem with conservatives is marketing. We can't attract any new members to our side of the aisle. And here's the thing, I'm not really that much of a conservative either. But I've talked to a lot of people who are still set in their liberal ways who will look at it and go, well, I disagree a lot with what the left has to say, but I just could never be a conservative because every single time I question the left, a conservative goes and says something retarded, like anime is for children, or that watching anime is how you become a degenerate big titty goth girl obsessee, or that saying hockey is a sport for sissies. These kind of idiotic rhetoric will chase away anyone trying to find a better explanation and a better way to live their life. And this insistence on destroying media, this insistence on destroying play and the avenues for learning is just one of the ways that we go about ruining our chance to properly market ourselves to the disenfranchised. How do you expect to bring people in who are tired of the Democrats if we're going to tell them they're evil for the things that they enjoy? Like, there's one that I've been saying that is one of the few places where we've tried to branch back to reclaiming media, and it's this kid's show called Turtle Twins. It's a cutesy Schoolhouse Rock kind of thing, minus the music, that follows these kids and their grandma as they travel through time and learn conservative values and lessons. Not by pushing conservatism, but by pushing realistic and truthful history. And I've even seen conservatives clown on that, claiming that it is a frivolous waste of time because we're engaging in childhood media. And for a great analogy, let's go and look at actual Japan for another reason why Homath is completely invalid in his argument of anime and its left-wing gobbleoid mentality. There's a fantastic anime studio called Studio Ghibli. I'm sure you've heard of it. They're responsible for some of the greatest movies ever made. They animated The Last Unicorn. They did Howl's Moving Castle, Ponyo, Up on Poppy Hill, My Neighbor Totoro. And you know what? A good number of their media is extremely conservative. Now, I'm not saying Confederate flag Nazi conservative, I'm saying actual conserving culture. Japan has gone through an extreme cultural evolution in the last 60 years. And it is something that has left Hayao Miyazaki, the creator of Studio Ghibli, incredibly conflicted. And he engages with the lessons of this cultural evolution, both the conservative perspective and the progressive perspective. He juggles them in a way that is fair, that shows the value in both. Up on Poppy Hill is literally a movie. It is done in the style of just two students interacting, but it is a movie about the Cultural Revolution and whether or not it's a good thing, pointing out a lot of the pros of the past and a lot of the cons of progress, as what we lose can never be reclaimed. Lord of the Rings is an inherently conservative piece of media. It is all about conserving the culture and the history and the virality of England and what it means to be English. The stories of Robin Hood, the stories of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, a lot of these stories that he's insulting are inherently either apolitical, anti-left, or right-wing. But because they dared to have the original sin of conception by pencil, he deems them completely unworthy of being focused on. And there's one final piece, one final thing I wanted to throw my hat in the ring of this conversation. And this might be a really retarded offering to throw forward, but I don't really give a damn. It is the song, The Logical Song by Supertramp. Now, I'm going to draw some assumptions about the creation of this song and the creators. I assume that they would not agree with me on anything, but that is irrelevant because the line is what's important. Death of the artist is kind of absolute. And I feel this is where conservatives have lost the plot. With these two verses. When I was young, it seemed that life was so wonderful. A miracle, oh, it was beautiful, magical. And all the birds in the trees, well, they'd be singing so happily, oh, joyfully, oh, playfully, watching me. But then they sent me away to teach me how to be sensible, logical, oh, responsible, practical. And then they showed me a world where I could be so dependable, oh, clinical, oh, intellectual, cynical. There are times when all the world's asleep and the questions run too deep. For such simple man, won't you please tell me what we've learned? I know it sounds absurd, please tell me who I am. I said, watch what you say or they'll be calling you a radical, a liberal, oh fanatical, criminal. Oh, won't you sign up your name? We'd like to feel you're acceptable, respectable, oh presentable, a vegetable. And while these lyrics do sound kind of hippy-dippy to me, the problem integral to this entire thing, the reason I'm bringing this up, is because if you dare just question the narrative, they will label you a liberal, a fanatical, a criminal, and they demand you to dumb yourself down, to refuse to engage and play, to lock yourself in a system where plasticity is not reinforced, and you lock yourself into a system where, as Devin mentioned, you'll turn yourself into a soulless dullard as you reinforce and demand the insistence of this limited worldview. But there is a better way to do it. We don't have to choose one or the other. We could, and here's an absolutely insane, crazy idea, we could juggle the two. We could both be logical and allow for a little bit of whimsy. Whimsy is also not the opposition of logic. We are demanding logic as a way to stifle, not as a way to grow and spread and integrate. Conservatives are only winning the culture war right now, and I would say we are currently winning, but we are only winning because of the fact that we have drawn so many people who aren't really a part of the conservative mind complex, but who are instead disenfranchised members of the liberal one. We have people who want to create, who want to make something new. Thank God for people like Eric July, who think that comics are an important thing. I'm going to copy the motto of Blacklist Universe. Culture is downstream of media. So if you do not have media that praises the values that you as an individual desire, then you will not have the culture that you desire. Media is absolute, it is necessary, and it is not something we need to shirk on. We need to prioritize it. And the last thing we need to do is shame our opposition for what they consume. We should be shaming them for the ideas they possess, not for the media and style that they go about consuming it. Instead, we should show them what's wrong instead of telling them that they're nothing more than a mongoloid for enjoying and watching it. Consumption isn't the issue, it's consumption without contemplation. But that's pretty much all I've got. I know this was long man bad. I know that I said a lot of things, and some of them are probably half-baked ideas. Some of them I came up with on the spot as I was going. I had no idea this video was going to end when I started it. But I've been going on for 45 minutes, give or take, and my throat is tired. I will most likely be talking about this once again on my good friend Theo Snodgrass's Touch Grass show, if you guys want to check out that discussion when it goes live at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And please, let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this. Any opposition you have to what I've said, I'd love to hear it. Any agreement, you can offer that too. And of course, I know my dad's gonna bombard me with things that I got wrong or didn't comprehend possibly, so I look forward to that too. But thanks you guys for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one.